So I'm gonna just start things off, Phoebe, and ask you, I've been rereading your work the last couple of days. And one of the things that stuck out to me was something that was echoed in an interview you did in 2004. And so I was looking through your work and I you see these actions and you see these situations that someone might come away with and their first reaction might be, well, these are narratives that talk about abuse. These are nightmarish scenarios being depicted. These are depictions of tragic events. In this interview that you do in 2004, the interviewer says, in the story Minnie's Third Love, we see you self-abusing your body. And you counter by saying, well, maybe I'm just using my body. And I think one of the things that comes through in your work is that it's hard to, I think increasingly with narratives that talk about abuse, there's maybe an almost requirement that the work has some kind of cathartic or moral statement, and it comes down to a simple message that the work has, which I don't see in your work at all. So I'm wondering if you could expand on that distinction. Someone comes away and says this work depicts self-abuse, and you say, well, maybe it's just depicting me using my body. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that in your work as a whole. And I think you have to unmute.
Yeah, I think I would have great difficulty coming up with a simple kind of moralistic statement at the end of any of my work, any of my pieces. Um, I think, well, if you're talking about like a child's life, right? If you're if you're a kid and you're in the middle of something and you grew up with something being treated a certain way or seeing adults act a certain way, even if you feel like something is wrong or you suspect it, you don't really know for sure, right? I mean, because you grew up this way. So it becomes so much more complex because it's not until, like for me, when I got into college and then I saw other people's families and visited other people, and it's like they did not grow up with the same messages that I grew up receiving. Uh, and then I started questioning the way I had been brought up. And it seemed, it hurt because I suddenly realized what I hadn't had, right? And, but consequently, the work, my work, because it was done from the point of view of a kid, it doesn't take all that other stuff that I learned in the future into consideration because the kid doesn't really have that to work with. So there's no, porthole that's showing you all the good, wonderful families that are out there. You're just not seeing it. Um, is that what you're after?
Yes, yes. And so
Yeah.
but that's really interesting to me because I think then you're depicting this child from the perspective after going through that process where you do feel some hurt about it. So that perspective, I would imagine, is that, but I think what sets it apart from a lot of comics is that there's a complexity there that it's not black or white, but it does. I think I'm wondering if someone comes away with this and wants to say these are narratives about things that are depicted, and I believe the author is saying these are inexcusable things, and there's an anger about them. But then there's parts to your work, and I think what makes it consequential that complicate that. But from you saying that, it does seem like you're coming out of a looking at this childhood experience and coming at it from a critical perspective.
Yeah, I guess so. But you know how they always talk about the inner child, right? And especially if that child has experienced any trauma. I mean, trauma is kind of experienced as, y- everything's happening all at once. Your memories, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, it's very easy for me to kind of lapse into another point in my development, even though I'm really old, and kind of feel those same
Hey,
things.
Suzanne. I'm
Oh,
listening to my son give a
oh,
lecture.
sorry. I need to mute.
Is that
That
your
I,
mommy?
yeah, that's my mom. I need to mute her.
what do you just tell
No,
me what you need?
no. Sorry. I'm just gonna mute everyone, and then I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself.
Unmute myself? Okay.
Okay. So unmute yourself now. Can Phoebe? Could you unmute yourself?
Oh yeah. Um, okay, look, nobody is all bad. Nobody is all good, right? So it's very easy to want to think that someone is all bad, right? I'm not particularly into Trump. Part of me believes he is all bad. Um, but he couldn't be because nobody is. Everyone has this complex inner life. Everyone was a kid at one point. But it's like you don't want to see that because you want to have your belief that things are black and white, good or bad. But that's just not how it is. And I guess that my impulse is never to punish anyone for being bad sometimes, but to try to understand why, I guess. Or, besides trying to understand my own self and my reason for um well, I don't know how to talk about this, but I feel like I'm losing my words now.
No, it's
Uh
really interesting.
it's what?
It's really interesting.
Yeah, okay. Um so especially nowadays, it's like you were saying, you want if there's some book about abuse or something, you want it to be presented as this is all wrong. This happened to me, shouldn't happen. I'm angry, and here's why. And then everyone should say, yeah, go, tell all about it. But in our polarized nation, it's so easy to look at things as though they're far more simple than they actually are. And that's just not interesting to me because it doesn't feel real. I mean, in reality, things are really confusing.
Someone in the chat says, this is partly about having empathy, which I think is true for a lot of things. And I'm wondering, though, for your work, the particular things that you're depicting, would empathy be a way to describe the kind of multifaceted perspective you have on these things? I don't know if, like, having looked at your work again so recently, I don't know if empathy is the right way to describe it. And I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, but it might
Well,
be a window.
well, it could be. I mean, we're talking again about childhood, and a child loves its parents or the adults that are in its life, right? It's natural. It would be rare that a kid just hates his mother or father, whatever. So there's always that love, even though something bad is happening to you. So I guess the empathy part could be the love for that person who's doing wrong. And I mean, I know that child abusers use that because they know that the child can attach very easily and is needs something and could take advantage of that. So it's not exactly empathy. It's, like your dog loves you and doesn't expect you to hit them. But when you hit them, it'll come back and look to you for safety. It doesn't really make sense, but and it's kind of heartbreaking, but that's just how it works. I
Well,
don't know.
I think that's a good cue to share. There's an image I wanted to show people. So let me just take a second to put this on the screen and I'll show it really briefly.
Uh-huh.
And this is spoilers for people who have not read Diary of a Teenage Girl, because this is at the end of it. So maybe turn turn your turn your screen away or walk away for a second. If you don't want this work spoiled, although it's not, it's not the kind of work that could be spoiled. But this is one of the final images in Diary of a Teenage Girl. And it's this later meeting with Monroe. And you say in the text, and then you underline it by having this image. You know, you have this character saying, "I'm better than you son of a bitch."
They're
But then,
not saying it, they're thinking it.
right, right, right. But you also are thinking at the same time, you're also thinking um, that you're remembering moments of feeling love for this. The feeling of love is fading away, or you're getting past it, but you're also remembering those moments of love at the same time. And I think that gets at this kind of like, I think maybe what people, well, first, what I'd like to ask you is, do you think, and I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so that you're able to respond to this. Um, do you think that people do you think people expect you have you noticed a tendency, and this might get into experiences you've had as an educator, do you think people, if this book came out now, they might object to that? Because there's a mix in that. I mean, there's this moment where at the end it feels like there's this clear hard line, like I'm thinking I'm reject I'm putting this person down, and there's power in putting this person down, but it's mixed with this recognition of past love. So at first I kind of wonder if you think that tendency, if you see less of that kind of dual way of accessing a situation. But then I also wonder, you're talking about how a child abuser might prey on the like prey on the knowledge that a child does have this love. If if there's if you'd be comfortable with someone just describing that kind of behavior as evil. Because when I look through your work, it's real it's there's this relentless, I mean, it's a relentless depiction of acts that are hard to react to any other way than to say there's things that might maybe are just simpler to just call evil. But then there's a rejection in me saying, well, that yes, there's nothing evil, nothing is so simple. So I'm kind of wondering what that last image brings up for you.
Well, in reality, um, she's saying that because her stepfather told her that in business, this is what he does. He shakes someone's hand, a competitor, even a colleague. He'll shake their hand, look them straight in the eyes, and think to himself, I'm better than you son of a bitch, and shake his hand as hard as they can. So it's kind of this, so she's borrowing that from another man in her life and applying it. And, whether or not she believes it for longer than that handshake, I don't know. But it makes her feel good at that moment.
Right. Right. And that, I think that further complicates it being this kind of like triumph that, that further complicates it being this triumphant thing to say, because it's inherited from another character that you can be critical of in
Right.
the narrative. So
Yeah.
I think that gets into these statements that you've made. You're talking about this work, and when we were talking about the work before we began um, recording, as it being about you but not being about you. And there's an interview in which you're asked about the autobiographical nature of your work, and there's many pages of the interview where you push back against it being categorized that way. And so I just want to kind of read, and this interview was done 20 years ago. I kind of am interested in the past 20 years how your feelings about this have changed, because I think in these two works, There's identical situations presented. There's variations. They're not identical. But there's similar phrases said at key moments. Um, and they seem to represent an experience that mirrors your own. But then, the idea of this being autobiographical is something that you reject. And I want to read these statements. You say, it's not important that the work is about me. It could be anyone. You also say, all individual experience is human experience. And then you talk about just the nature of living a life, and you say, death is a moment of celebration. Life is a fever, a sickness. And then I kind of want to continue with what you said there. Um, Death is a moment of celebration. Life is a fever, a sickness, and we can't recover from it. I've always felt that my feelings are as close to the surface that if I don't express them somehow, I'll implode. Everything seems almost too vivid. There's no cure for it. Art doesn't seek a cure. Therapy does. I'm not trying to cure myself with my art. The idea seems ridiculous. And this is in response to you not believing your work is therapeutic. So I'm wondering how you feel about those are very, I think, very interesting and charged statements. I'm wondering how you feel about those things now.
Yeah, I think I was trying to quote Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, you do. You do. You quote a poem.
Yeah, right. What do I think about those things now? Well, okay, the situation, that particular interview, it was done by Gary Groth, and I don't know how long it is. It's like 30 pages long, but he just wouldn't, he kept trying to make me admit that this was about me, it's about me, it's about me. And so it just kept getting more and more entrenched because in reality, even if I experienced everything that I had written and drawn about, I'm very aware that it's only my point of view. And I'm very aware that time passes and I will tell myself the same stories again differently than I did the first time.
Right.
And this is interesting to me because memory is fugitive and it's malleable and it's it changes in relation to your current state. So you bring different meaning to your past by whatever is going on in the moment. And so in the end, how do we know anything for sure? One thing we can know is how we respond to our memories. I mean, that's an emotion, that's a real thing. Only you feel it. And that doesn't tend to change a whole lot. Well, it can actually, I'll take it back. But I guess, okay. So none of my work is like an expose of my life. It's the farthest thing from it. Um, I think that I look at this character that appears to be something like me. I see them as a character. I mean, it started when I was a teenager. I would write stories and it would seem that I am a character. But the thing is, I had no empathy for myself at all. I hated myself. So ugly, so fat, so many pimples. Just hated myself. Such a bad student, Um, so fucking stupid. Whatever teenagers think. I mean, I thought it in spades, right? And if I had if I had done a story about myself, there's no way I could have given that character any dimension because it was just this self-hating blob. So somehow I was able to separate my current self from the self that understood myself before in order, and I had to look at that self as someone who wasn't me in order to have empathy for them, almost as if it could be anybody else in that situation. So it was not by design, but that's what I did and what I continue to do sometimes. Um, does that sound crazy? It's
No,
like
no,
this
not at all.
schizophrenic thing where you're kind of like, disassociating yourself from yourself in order to see yourself. And therefore, it's not like autobiography to me. That's not the experience.
I think what's interesting about that exchange is that it's easy to sense your frustration with it being it you know it being pushed back against that it's not autobiography and someone trying to make you admit that it's autobiography. But I do wonder if it's a common experience that you have when people approach you about these two works that they just assume that they are 100% autobiographical, even though the names are changed. Um, and if that's happened, maybe that happened with your early work, and then with Diary of a Teenage Girl to continue. I wonder if I guess I wonder if you thought, well, is it important for you to avoid that confusion for the reader? Um, and if it was, did you consider maybe doing short stories that had no like the same themes, the same concerns. I'm wondering what if it is important for you for for that to be separated.
Well,
Um,
the thing is,
like this.
I guess I never understood why it was important for anybody to know whether it was really me or not.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, that would be sad if that's the most important thing about my work is, well, is this true or not? It seems, and I guess part of me rejects that. And it makes me want to say no. But the other thing is, okay, like Diary of a Teenage Girl, it incorporates a lot of my actual diaries from the time, but edited, whatever. But a diary is not necessarily a, a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, it's a sequence of events, but it doesn't necessarily add up to a good book. There's a
a diary
million, what?
a diary isn't necessarily true either. You know.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily true. So there's so much artifice that goes into, or at least for me, that went into making a story, of that past, right? And the artifice that I'm very aware of, I mean, I didn't remember what half the people looked like, so I'm just in my head trying to remember these things. I didn't have pictures of most of the people, so, at what point is it untrue? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I,
To me,
yeah.
it makes yeah. To me, there's no it's an unimportant distinction. But I wonder, I mean it's something to think about for sure. And it's interesting to hear your relationship to it. Um but I do wonder, yeah, I just wonder if it seems that it doesn't in some way, but then it seems that it also does. If it concerns you what readers are because the parallels are there, I think maybe someone might be like, okay, well, I'm concerned enough about this that I want to throw the reader off and not have to deal with this question anymore because I feel it does a disservice to my work that there might be this confusion. And I guess I get so in some ways I think that
Okay, I have a question for you.
sure.
Okay, I just listened to your interview with John Porcellino,
Hmm.
and I don't remember you ever asking him if any of his work was autobiographical,
I think because yeah, well, yes, continue.
but I assume a lot of it is. Do
Yeah,
you
I mean,
care?
yeah, of course. I'm just kind of
Right.
interested in because I'm interested in your feelings about it. I think John, um, I just don't think John is that he's conflicted about it. And I'm not saying you're conflicted about it, of
Yeah,
course.
I'm not conflicted. It really seems to me like I can say that uh, Austin, it's just something in my head when I'm doing work, I can use elements of myself because my perspective is the only perspective I truly know, right? I mean, All of us humans are like that. We can imagine other people's perspectives, but um, I'm afraid I'm not answering this very well
No,
because
you are. You
never,
are.
because for me, really, I can honestly say it's not autobiography because there is so much work and artifice that goes into crafting the book that it takes it away from any truth that would be measurable. I mean, there's lots of facts you can compare and say, that's true, that's true, that's true. But in the end, you want the character to have their own life outside of you,
Of course.
a life that you can imagine that character, even after the book ends, ending up someplace else, right?
Yeah,
And that's not me, you know? That's a flibberty gibbet that lives their own life in a book.
of course. Yes. And I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, to me, it's not, I don't think pure autobiography exists at all. I'm just more interested in, I'm interested in just your feelings about the issue because I find them really interesting. And I find whatever your work, whatever you're drawing on, and however you counter what you're drawing on with your work, I find that interplay really interesting. So I'm more asking about that.
Okay. Okay.
I did want to get into you've written about it, this experience you had as an educator. Do you want to tell people how long you've been teaching and a little bit about that part of your life?
Oh yeah, I've been teaching for like 20 years. And yeah, 20 years. And I moved to Michigan from New York and yeah. And I've been teaching at the University of Michigan and I'm the only comics teacher. I've always tried to get another one, someone with a different point of view, but I'm still the only one.
Well, there was, I think, there's a story that I think some people might be aware of, but it's an event that happened at the school that I think you wrote about it a little bit, and it's something that happened in relation to your teaching and a controversy around it. I have a specific question about it, but I think for people that aren't aware of it or maybe don't know about this issue at all, if you don't mind going into it and describing the events that happened as you see them.
Sure. No, I did write a pretty long article about it in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Um, and what happened actually, it- to put it in a nutshell, I suppose, um, I showed a piece of art by Robert Crumb on a day that I had been showing single images from lots and lots of artists, like 50 artists or something. It was like the first day of class, and I was just saying, comics can be lots of things, and here's a lot of styles, and just look at all this. I wasn't giving a lot of information on the artists themselves. It was just kind of a preview. And the image I showed by Robert Crumb, who is a provocative artist, as you probably all know, was not a particularly a I didn't think it really had the potential to offend anyone. It was pretty tame. But this was on Zoom, and the students looked Robert Crumb up and started protesting, saying that he was a rapist. Not even that his work was offensive or anything. They were telling me that he was a rapist, and how dare I show his work.
And what can I interject? What were they like that description of him? What were they? Was there a specific source they were citing that from, or where was that coming from? That accusation.
It was coming from somewhere on the web, and I'm not sure where, but it's not something that I had heard. And, it's not something that I would believe just because I read it on.
They weren't providing you with like they weren't like, look, here's they were
No,
just okay.
no, right. Um, but at any rate, what happened is that the students, after that first class, um, several students started this texting group in the class. And um, I was not included. It was just all the students in the class. And they were very vigilant. They watched everything I did and anything they perceived as me doing wrong, they started recording it in this chat. Um, I don't even think they were listening to anything I was saying. They were just watching for if I fucked up or not.
Yeah.
And I became aware of this because there was a bunch of students who were totally freaked out by this, who didn't feel like I had done anything wrong. So they started sending me screenshots of this chat after every class. And at first I was like really grateful to them because I felt supported, but they were scared to death. They felt like they were taking a huge chance because they didn't want me to reveal their identities because they thought they would be attacked by the students who were attacking me. And they kept sending me these things, and it got me more and more just nervous. I was a wreck. Every day I was getting these things like, oh, you misgendered somebody, you did this, that, it's like I could do nothing right. And I was afraid to look at my email because I just see more screenshots. And anyway, it was during Zoom, and this was not an ideal time. And a lot of what the students were protesting um, were things that generally I would agree with, but they had chosen me as the target, and I was the wrong target um, because I actually agreed with them in many ways, and it didn't matter. I couldn't say anything right. It was um it was the most frightening couple of years, really. I mean, several of the students were kept taking my classes for the next 2 semesters. And again, I think it was so they could surveil me further.
Mm.
Uh, and I asked my dean for assistance, and he had a meeting with me, and there was a third person there, which surprised me. And he told me that I cannot speak to you without a witness. So obviously, he had determined that I was a threat to the department legally. And consequently, I had absolutely no support. And I went through a whole investigation, inquiry, investigation. I had no lawyer. And then I was told, anything I say could be held against me. I was afraid to leave my house because it was at the same time that a French professor was shot in Paris, I think, outside of Paris, for for even talking about the Charlie Hebdo stuff. And he was shot and murdered by his students. And it was just, it entered my head. I mean, this is not France. Logically, I didn't really believe they were going to shoot me, but I didn't want to leave the house because I felt so vulnerable. Um, so it was fucking crazy. Anyway, in the end, this investigation found that I hadn't done anything wrong. And but nevertheless, I felt so vulnerable and so kind of betrayed by the administration um that when I returned to school after one summer, I could no longer even understand why I was risking my own happiness by teaching at all. And that was 2 years ago. Um, and I kept teaching. We got a new dean and a new administration, and they're so much better. They talk about things. They don't, if it had happened, when the new dean was in his position, things would have been entirely different because I think a lot of the pain that I felt was the fact that I just had no support whatsoever. Um, and then, when people accuse you of things, um, it's hard to even talk to your friends about it sometimes because you're afraid they're gonna believe it or have some doubts about you. So that further pushes you into a hole, isolates you. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, if those students wanted to hurt me, they didn't succeed in getting me fired or even sanctioned, but they did hurt me. And it has had lasting effects. So if you're out there, you succeeded. But I'm still here. And it's getting better. I mean, times have changed, but it was not a good period in history for me.
Well, you say that the way the current administration is handling it is, or handling issues like this, or might handle issues like this, and is better, and things are getting better. But can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about maybe what you still, just in terms of teaching, or in terms of how you're going to present artwork that is important to you, worrying about not being able to get at the nuances it might have? Is that something that impacts your teaching now, or not just, maybe not just in your teaching, just in terms of how you might talk about art with someone in general? I mean, the art that you were showing, Crumb's work, is something that you have, not just as a cartoonist a connection to, but it's someone you've known since very early in your life, that's had a lot to do with your own career. And so, just in terms of explaining that work to other people, students or not, I wonder how you feel about it.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, certainly the experience has made me more hesitant to show the work of certain artists, um, including artists that I adore, that I really admire. Um, and yeah, I mean, you're asking me like if I talk about R. Crumb, even to you or somebody, do I have to defend admiring his work?
No, I'm kind of just wondering how you feel now versus how you felt prior to this incident, maybe specifically with teaching, but just as someone in the world who cares about this stuff, communicating about it.
Um,
Or if
well,
maybe if your perspective on the work has, did it, I wonder if it changed your perspective on the work, that I guess, um I wonder if you identified with any of their, if you saw any of their criticisms of it, as what part of their criticisms you might say, okay, that's legitimate, and I'm interested in that, or and how much you just purely were like, I don't connect with this at all. I don't connect with your rejection of this work at all. And maybe how that's carried over.
well, I mean, like I said, I showed the first image on that first day, and the response was he's a rapist.
Right.
So
Right. That's not very nuanced.
it's not very nuanced, and it's not really about the work, right? Um, so
It didn't go beyond that. They didn't have, I
well,
mean,
it
was there
did
any,
it did. And I had to, I mean, it was like a comedy of errors. I mean, I was so kind of taken aback by, you know, their protests that day that I was I thought, okay, I need to talk more about like the underground movement. This is totally out of sequence, but I need to talk more. So I was on my computer and I was looking through this folder of like underground comics covers. And I had forgotten to turn off my screen sharing. And so they're looking at all these covers and they see Jay Kinney's cover for Young Lust, a story he did called Red Guard Romance. Um, and it shows like, you know, a young couple in soldiers' uniforms and they're kind of making out on the cover. And the students were just like, "Ah, how could you show us that?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't know the screen was on. I'm just looking for something else.
And this was
So
in the moment that this is all happening. This is
yeah,
the same class. Okay.
yeah. And so I could say that is my fault for not remembering to turn off the screen sharing. I mean, I could say a million of things are my fault, but in the end, I did nothing intentionally to hurt them. And I think if we had been able to have the conversations about the artwork, um, that they probably would not have felt the way they did. But we were never able to have conversations. I mean, that's the first time I asked Bill Cardelopoulos to come talk about the history of comics in my class because I didn't think they would listen to anything I said. So he did, and too was nervous about talking about the underground. He kind of glossed over it and emphasized how offensive they were to many people, but this was on purpose, they were provocative. But yeah, it was just fucking crazy. Ask me about something really positive.
Okay.
I,
I wanted to ask you some more stuff about that, but we can circle back to it if you want.
okay, okay, okay.
Um, would you like to talk a little bit about, well, I was kind of interested in you talking about, this work, Diary of a Teenage Girl, comes out, and I think it's probably what more people have read of your work than than anything else. Um, and to me, looking at your work over the years, I feel like your work always, I think, sticks out to people for this technical beauty that it has. It's just very, I think, in comparison to many of your peers and cartoonists in general, it's drawn at such a high level. And I feel like the work in Diary of a Teenage Girl might be less like outwardly spectacular, but is, I think, even attains a new level of real assurance and beauty in drawing. And you've since that work, you've done other projects. And you haven't, I think you were saying, you've been drawing and you do drawing that isn't comics. But you were saying before we started that maybe what you should have done is just do another, long comic or something like that. And I'm interested in if it's that your style became so textured and complex and strong, the way you draw, if sitting down to do a comic at that level became a challenge, to meet your own standards.
Well, it's weird because I don't think Diary of a Teenage Girl meets my standards. Some of my favorite drawings are in A Child's Life. I think there are a lot, I, I like them better, but they also took a long time. And I think when I was doing Diary of a Teenage Girl, I was very aware of other cartoonists like Dan Clowes or somebody my age, other people who were really prolific. And I wanted to kind of scale down my style so I could draw more quickly. And the result was Diary of a Teenage Girl. It's drawn, it took me a lot less time to draw 3 pages of comics in that hybrid book than it did for me to draw 1 page or and some of the things I like better in A Child's Life, the newer whatever. But not all of it, but some of it. So um then I thought, you know, if I want to be super prolific, I'm going to have to keep doing this like scaled down style, and I really am not pleased with it. Um, and so I didn't want to do that. I mean, then I could return to just doing work slowly, I suppose, and really enjoying it. But instead, when I was asked to go to Juarez, Mexico, um, to do a story for a book that was to benefit Amnesty International. And I met with a lot of families of girls who had been murdered. And it just made such a huge impression on me. First of all, because I had two little girls of my own. So it was so easy to imagine and to empathize with the pain of the mothers and fathers. And, then this huge stack of police files was thrown at me. And on the plane home, the first time I went to Juarez, on the plane home, I was reading all these descriptions. And when I got back, to the United States, it was really hard for me to draw a story about that. I've talked about this before, but the way your brain works when you're drawing, you're never going to have enough references to be able to draw one character again and again from every different position. Your brain just kind of becomes this 3D modeling thing where you're kind of turning it around in your head and then you draw it, right? So to do that, you have to keep stuff in your head for a long time. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so I almost gave up. And then I thought, oh, I really like photonovellas. I learned to speak Czech by reading photonovellas. I learned to speak French by reading photonovellas. They're kind of aesthetically kind of shitty, but I kept thinking there's got to be a way to make it really cool. And so I just started using dolls as the characters because I thought I could kill them, could strangle them, whatever I want. The next day I can wipe off the blood and the dolls will be alive again, right? This kind of magical thinking. And it made me feel better about doing any story for about the women murdered in Juarez. But then I didn't like using dolls that already existed. So then I had to learn how to make my own dolls. And then I didn't like using furniture that already existed. So then I had to learn how to use power tools and build my own rooms and my own furniture for the dolls. And it ended up taking like 17 million times longer than it did to draw. And I thought, oh, it'd be so easy because I just make it and take a picture. It wasn't that easy. But yeah, I've been working on it for a really long time. But there's an advantage to that in terms of the story because the family I was focusing on lived in the western outskirts of Juarez, which when I first went there was basically a shanty town where people just went and squatted if they couldn't buy the land. And they started building a structure, like with building pallets or construction refuse. So,
Can I just interject and can you go back
yeah,
and talk about how you were invited to do this project initially? It was for the We Live Here.
yeah,
Yes. Can you just talk a little bit about what that project, because that was a very ambitious, it was an anthology, and I think it was a very, I don't think people remember it, and it was a very interesting thing, and that's what started this project for you. Can you talk a
right.
little bit about how the origins of that project?
Well, this actress called me up one day and said, I read Diary of a Teenage Girl and you have to come to Mexico with me. And I said, I can't, sorry. And then she kept calling me. I mean, she kept calling me and telling me I was the only one who could do it. I was the only one, which wasn't true because I found out she asked Jessica Abel to do it first. But anyway, uh, I felt so guilty because I'm a sucker, and it was as if we were going to change the world by doing this book, right? And Joe Sacco was in it, and I can't even remember who else, but a lot of people I admire. And so I went to Juarez
But it was to go, it was for different artists to go to places where events like this had happened
and do the research,
to
meet
do
people. Yeah,
graphic depictions. Yes.
yeah, right. So initially I was there for 2 weeks, But after that project was finished, I started going back like twice a year. And um, so yeah,
Can you can you describe what you know, it's interesting because I think you've talked about the act of making comics. You talk about it as a little bit as moving adult. It's no longer, you know, with the discussion of whether it's autobiography or not, that it's, you know, you're moving this doll around this environment and you've constructed the environment. And then it's like you're using the same language to describe your current project. Can you talk about what you're trying to depict with this project, what the event is that you're depicting in this, and maybe you can show us some images from it and walk us through it?
sure. I mean, it's not so much that I'm trying to depict any event. What I'm trying to do is, okay, imagine yourself. You're from San Francisco. You live in New York. Um, and suddenly you think, oh, gee, all my friends are kind of like me. They're cartoonists or whatever, right? And you're suddenly thrown into a place where you don't speak the same language. You're either, well, in my case, I did not speak Spanish at all then when I first went. And I was in a situation where all of the people I was interviewing were from a different socioeconomic level. Here I was a professor and, you know, I'm talking to people who have no jobs and their daughter's dead. So it seemed like this insurmountable barrier was between us. Like, yeah, I'm not a reporter, right? A reporter might go down there and interview people, get their story and write it down, leave, publish it, and then hopefully the story gets back to the people it's about so they can see it too and have some benefit from it, but oftentimes they don't. Um, but I guess I'm not a journalist and I wanted to really know the people I was writing about. And I think it took about 5 years, literally 5 years. I kept going back and I just always felt like, Jesus Christ, they're seeing me as this professor. You know, obviously I can afford to take a plane here. I could do this. I could rent a car. And I'm somehow still seeing them as victims who need to be polite to me or something because I'm in a different position. And so it just felt like, what am I doing? It's like
What you're doing is important. You know, you have a feeling that like, oh, I'm doing something very beneficial with my art, maybe. You know, like maybe that feeling passes through you as well.
well, sure it does, but how can I do it if I can't really know these people?
Right, right.
So, but plus, I mean, beneficial is funny, right? Because there's so many things. If you tell yourself, I want to benefit someone else by this story, the only story you can tell, the only value that it has is if it's true. If it's true, it will move people. And finding the truth, and I don't mean the literal truth, but understanding other people is is for me, it was the most important and the hardest thing to do because of the barriers. And so, yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that brings me back to my first question. Um, I think your work stands apart from a lot of comics in that, you know, I was struggling to describe it as, okay, your work has this nuanced portrait of things that someone else might have a very just concrete like moral judgment of, right? And I think what you just said, work that's true tries to understand people. I think that's what I think that's really what I see in your work. And I think it's what makes it stand apart. And I'm wondering, I guess I'm just kind of wondering if you, who of your peers you might see that same, not just limited to cartoonists. I mean, I'd definitely be interested in the world of comics, who you see engaged in that same project, but maybe just artists in general. Because I do think that to me is true art, you know, an engagement with the world and trying to approach understanding. But I don't think all art is engaged in that. You know, I would say a majority of it isn't. So I'm wondering who you resonate with that.
Uh, well, let's see. One of my favorite films is Angst essen Seele auf. It's translated as Ali, Fear Eats the Soul by Werner Rainer Fassbinder. It's from the 70s. Um, but I mean, you guys might already know. Oh, someone does know. Yeah. Uh, it's
I like
should I,
Fox and his friends.
it's what?
I like Fox and his friends.
Okay. Yeah, that one is good too. But anyway, the one I'm talking about is my absolute favorite. And it does, it's about an old woman who falls in love and it's mutual with a young immigrant man. But they both are suffering so much. It's so intense and you really have such empathy for both characters. But anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. I recommend it to everyone. So that's one person. Um, I don't know. My whole life, I've always been obsessed with Janis Joplin. This is true. And I think what resonates for me with her, I mean, when I first heard her, I didn't even know she was dead. I was a kid. I had no idea she was dead, and I had some record. Um, I mean, you can feel the pain in her voice. It's it's just like a conduit from her heart to your ear, and it feels absolutely genuine, no doubt in my mind. And it's not that I like pain, but I like genuine feeling, I suppose. Um,
This
yeah.
work is a hybrid work where it's written and there's comics in it. It's prose, it's a mix of prose and comics. And I wonder, maybe your work sticks out so much in comics because I think it approaches what we're talking about better than so many. I'm wondering if you find, maybe you decided to do a hybrid work and maybe you've reached out in these other forms of media, because I feel like it's very hard to do that in comics. It's hard to get at that kind of. I mean, do you find as someone who's worked in other mediums and you're citing, your first examples of this kind of quality, a filmmaker and a singer, do you find comics especially hard to get at that kind of it's sometimes I feel like they just require like communicating information much more, like you have to communicate what the picture means, and that becomes harder to jump off of that information into some kind of uh emotional meaning. Do you find comics especially hard to get at this quality, or
Well, no. I
not?
mean, I guess if I did, I wouldn't do them, right?
Yeah,
Um, no, I think they're particularly good at doing that, or at least in my experience. Um, I mean, that book is a hybrid because if it was just written, it probably would not have had the same effect. Well, there's also a matter of point of view. I mean, the comics are from my point of view as an older person, and the written parts are, like I said, mostly real diaries. So they're from a more childish point of view. So I needed those two points of view, but you can, you don't have to describe expressions. You can show expressions. You
right.
don't have to say everything someone's doing. You can show that. So I think the possibilities for emotiveness are, I think it's a great medium for that.
Yeah.
But you're saying you don't think it is?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's there's people like yourself that I think show how perfect it is for that. But I'm always it's always interesting to me the parallel times that film and comics exist where it just seems like the ratio of people like yourself and many of the artists that I'm interested in that are able to harness that power of comics, which when you describe it, when I look at your work, it seems so obvious. But the examples of people harnessing that do seem in the minority. And I'm
Well, do
always
you think that's their intention? Do you think they're just not fulfilling what they're trying to do? Or maybe that's not what they want to do.
I don't know. I'm endlessly fascinated by it. And talking to someone whose project in comics, I think, syncs up with what I think the medium can be at its most emotive and
Mhm.
do so successfully that it feels like that's all it should do and what it's built for. Um, yeah, I'm just interested in your perspective on it. And for you, I think it makes sense that it's for you, it comes maybe I'm not going to say it comes naturally because you put so much work into your comics and your narratives. But for you, it's unquestionable.
Well, there's always like, okay, you know the Scott McCloud idea that a simpler face with very little
Yeah.
detail in it
Hmm.
is better than a more complicated, like very specific portrait because readers will relate to the simple face
Yes.
more than the particular face. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah. Neither do I.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm responding right now to your face in all the detail I can see, right? And if you had two dots and a smiley face, it wouldn't make me like you more. I would run away. I don't know. So I think I try to make my characters pretty specific. Um, not to turn people off, but to make them realize they're real people. It could be anybody. I don't know if that's if everyone would agree with that, that more specificity, can't say that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I, that the more specific an image appears, that it's actually easier to relate to that than to a stylized cartoon face. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because that McLeod thing is so influential. And when I teach comics, I think the one of the classes I inherited was based on McLeod's texts, and I've never used them because I think that especially that thing about a simple face being something you can identify with. I feel like it looks at a tendency where comics have done that, and it says, well, this is how they're supposed to be done, and I think that invites a certain kind of person with a certain kind of sensibility that is against this project that we're talking about. Not against it, but it doesn't sync up with
Right.
it.
No,
If
it doesn't sync up with, right.
they
Yeah,
want some kind of they're looking more for information than something that emotes. And I do think by explain comics explaining itself to itself as well, one of the requirements is things are caricature, icon. That's what we're built on. It excludes, I mean, people talk a lot about exclusion, but I think that approach and that kind of belief in the form as having that approach, and that's one of the rules, excludes a lot of sensibilities that I feel your work and probably everyone that we care about prove incorrect most of the time.
yeah. I mean, you know, I've met Scott and he's a great person, but I've never used his text in my class. A lot of students come in reading it,
Yes.
and then they expect the class to be kind of a how-to on how to do comics, and which is kind of totally contrary to how I learned. And it also, I mean, comics can be anything, right? It's just like literature. They can be about everything and anything, and they can be in any style. And once you have this like kind of handbook on what comics are and what they can be, it just is limiting. It's naturally limiting. And so I don't think it advances comics in any way. I mean, I want comics to be anything. Yeah.
Can I ask you just I mean, in that spirit, can I ask you to show us some work from the Juarez project? And as you do that, I'm going to encourage people to ask some questions of their own, as if you don't mind going through the Juarez pictures and kind of telling us. I think I'd also like to hear, unless you said it and I missed it, what because you said you went to Juarez and then you were visiting with families that people had been killed. Can you talk a little bit about what the because but then you said it wasn't an event you were responding to. Can you talk about what went on there that the project is based on? Or maybe I'm
Well, if you okay, so the first time I went to Juarez was like in 2003. Yeah. And then I actually got a Guggenheim Fellowship that would have allowed me to live in Juarez for a period of time. But I kept reading the papers every day, like preparing to go, and I noticed that every day there was more murders than the day before. It was just like ratcheting
okay.
up. And that was like 2009. And by the end of 2010, there were approximately 4,000 murders in this city, which is about the size, it was at that time, about the size of Detroit. So Detroit was considered dangerous and only had 400 murders.
Right.
So 4,000 is a fuck of a lot. And then the university wouldn't let me go to Juarez. So I couldn't use any funds or matching funds or whatever they had for that purpose because it was too dangerous. And anyway, but I went, I didn't live there, but I just went like a few times that year. And but so when I say it wasn't about any particular event, um, it's about a lot of events. It's about this kind of a societal trauma, I guess. When so many people are killed, it's hard to find anyone who hasn't been affected by that.
Right.
And it changes people and it changes a place. And um, so anyway, so that is part of it.
Can we see as people formulate their questions, can we see some images from it? And can you tell us what's happening in them or the work
Sure.
that went into them?
Um, yeah. Let me see. What am I going to show? Okay. Oh, screen sharing. Wait. Um, share. Okay, this is a website. So anyway, okay, see, it's hard to explain it without telling the whole story, but I'm not going to tell you the whole story. I'll just show you some images. These are like, this is a composite photo. Those are houses that I made, and then this mountain that I'm obsessed with in the background. And then I was making like schematics of this Colonia Anapra because I'm obsessed with it. And the reason I'm happy that it's taken me so long is that I was in this neighborhood when there was like, I don't know, 20 houses. Now the whole place is paved. Before it had absolutely no infrastructure. And I've seen it change. And um, that's the house of the family that I'm really focusing on. That's where they lived. There's like 12 people living in there, and they lived there for, 10 years. Um, and that's the back of the house. This is fake. I built all these things here. Um, again, fake. Those are some of my dolls,
Hmm.
and that's a girl named Nana and her little brother with some weird guy following them. But that's her house back there, and um, that's the real house outside. Um, they tore anyway, I don't have to go into every detail,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
um well, I'm trying to get out of here, but this Zoom thing is okay, and then at first I thought, oh, I'm going to do this really cool book where, by the time I finish it, technology will have caught up and I could do what I want to do. I wanted to make this kind of readable movie where there was text, there were images, and then you could lapse into, uh, animated or, live action things that you could control by yourself. But I wanted it to be all seamless, just like Diary of a Teenage Girl. It was comics and text, and it took me a long time to figure out. I wanted it to read as though it was all the same thing, like meant to be together. But, technology, this is an example. I was doing 3D, I mean, you know, um, 360 shots of like the interior of the
Hmm.
houses that I built. This is an experiment. It's just something, but it's what it looks like inside. Um, and uh I tried, these are experiments here. Like I tried at first, like I talked about photo novellas before. So I used people that were either in Ann Arbor or in Mexico, and I had them act. Actually, they loved it. Like this girl, her sister was murdered, but she loved acting, so she was doing anything. She would do anything, and we were having so much fun. These are just covers of like fake photo novellas, some of which I actually finished, but they would be included as little books inside the book. And those are just kind of, you know, pictures that appear in some of these things. Um, so those are real people. And then dolls, dolls, dolls. Where'd you go? Um, am I talking too much about this stuff?
No, this is great because I think
Okay.
I've heard about this project over the years, but I don't know. You telling me about it is new information to me, and I imagine to many people.
Okay. Um, I shouldn't show violent things, right?
You can.
You
We just have
sure?
to put like we have to put some if we when we upload it. I mean, when we upload it to YouTube, we have to put like some kind of filter on it, but it's okay.
Okay, it's just dolls though.
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Um, this is this is actually a guy I was going to interview, and I was 2 blocks away from his house. And these kids that I'd been visiting were screaming like, "Oh, get us some ice cream, get us some ice cream." So we go down to the ice cream place, and that kind of holds me up because I was supposed to meet him. And we're having the ice cream, and all of a sudden all these cop cars and cars full of army people start driving by with sirens, and we didn't know what was going on. But then like 10 minutes later, I get this Google alert that tells me that this guy was killed on the corner of this and that. And it was the guy I was going to interview. And he was killed like 2 blocks from, and I was just about to go walk to his house. But anyway, his name was El Moyote, which is one word for mosquito because he was really skinny. I was really sad that I didn't talk to him. Um, but anyway, then these are other things. These are I just reinterpreted or rebuilt actual things that I read in the news that aren't pleasant. But so those are something, but you don't have to look at that stuff because I know it's depressing. Um, more dolls. These are kind of more neutral. Um,
Can
that's
I ask
supposed
you this? When you being engaged in this process, when the whole controversy happened at the school that you teach at, did um did you worry that this project would be criticized for reasons for because there would I imagine conversations at that time where oh this person isn't from this specific culture and they're commenting on it. Did you worry about that coming into the criticism that you were going through, or did it change how you felt you when you were working on it?
well, yeah, I mean that has already happened. I this arm of the university called the International Institute invited me to do an exhibition of some of this work in progress. and I was going to have some of the houses I build like set up and figures or whatever. But then this group of anonymous professors wrote a letter that was forwarded to me with no name signed, and it just said that they take issue with me having an exhibition because by making dolls, I had miniaturized and infantilized the Mexican body, and they took great offense at that. But so this was confusing to me because I had spent the last 10 years of my life like loving every detail, paying such, building every little thing in someone's house, um, wanting things to be, you know, real. And I wouldn't even say respectful. I just wanted to reflect what I saw.
Yeah.
And so, and then I thought, well, if I had made a comic, would they like that better? I mean, plenty of people have done comics about people in another place, like including Joe Sacco, but these are cartoon characters. Are those as offensive as dolls? I mean, it was so confounding to me, but I am sensitive, so I don't talk about my work generally, uh, because I'm always expected to be hit on the head or slapped for being bad. But
You mean in your classes or in general, you don't talk about your work?
in general, in fact, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I don't know. But
What do you think? Like, you're worried about being slapped on the head for being bad about it. What do you think people would say this is bad? What's the aspect that you think?
well, they would say what they said, that I
Right.
am miniaturizing and infantilizing. Um, the thing is, the worst enemy of any artist is self-consciousness. You're not going to do your best work when you're self-conscious. And when you're worried about other people, what other people will think, and when you're trying to please other people and avoid criticism by doing what you think they want you to do, it's going to be shitty work. I mean, at least for me, hands down, it's going to be shitty work. So, um, so the question is, why am I even talking about it? Good question. I don't know. Let me see if there's any other pictures. These are just, you know, I like this because I made all these tiny little newspapers and I thought those were cool.
Hmm.
Um,
Incredible to see these.
and thanks. That's Lourdes Portillo. She's a real person. She died though. Okay, some more. That's a girl sitting on my feet in my office.
Hmm.
This was an attempt at doing, I don't know why I put this in here. It looks really stupid. I still haven't figured out a good way of doing that. And that's supposed to be like inside my studio and someone's looking through the window.
Hmm.
And that's me looking at her. This is not telling you the story, it's just images.
What's the what's the do you see a completion date in mind with this project, or is it still I mean it's so rich with detail that I could imagine you adding to it for quite some time. But I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
that would be a mistake.
yeah.
I don't have a publisher for it. I haven't looked for one. And as a matter of fact, I've taken my other books out of print. So right now they're unavailable. Um,
Is there a reason for that you've taken them out of print?
well, I wasn't published by a comics publisher, and I wasn't published by a big book publisher that got good distribution. And for the longest time, I couldn't get my books into comic book stores. And that really bothered me. And so I was like taking my books to comic book stores and asking them to put them there. But of course, you can't do that forever.
Yeah.
So, um, and there were other things. I just felt like, I was one of the only cartoonists they were publishing, and it just didn't seem to make sense. So, um, yeah, so my books are unavailable. And I guess when I finish this book, I'll try to get the other books reprinted with the new publisher. I don't know who that will be. I also worry that the way I'm doing this book, even though it is the way I want it to look, it would be expensive to print, and maybe no one will want to print it. So that's a real consideration. Um, but I don't know. I'm doing it because it seems like I'm supposed to, because I was put in this place and I have to tell this story.
But you're still generating imagery for it currently.
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I've made a lot of new things. I mean, I'm doing it all the time and
Mm.
perfecting the armatures of the dolls. I mean, it's complicated. Honestly, it is complicated.
So much of it seems like it comes down to the way you're posing I mean, it's the creation of the dolls is probably what takes the most time, but setting up these shots and posing, telling the story through how the characters are placed and then cropping the photo and telling the story that way. That seems like the artistic a lot of the artistic work that must go into it.
It is. You want the dolls to kind of have expression.
Yeah.
This is just some of the process. That's in my garage. That's in my garage. That's like a recreation of this whole neighborhood. I mean, it's not finished in this picture, but it's part of it. And that's like my attic has this, 2 blocks of this neighborhood. And there it is again. Um, but they're like exactly the houses that the I know all the people in those houses. Um, that's my cat for scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
Beautiful.
yeah. Okay, I'll stop.
Samuel Edmay wants to ask, do you still discuss underground comics in your classes?
Kind of sideways. Like, actually, I know a bunch of young cartoonists who have talked in my classes, like Floyd Tangerman and um, Samantha Siegel, Kaya Stars, Nate Garcia, Sarah Kirby. They've all come and they're all influenced by the underground. And they talk about it to a certain extent. And then that gives me a segue to talk about it more. But I'm still a little skittish about it, honestly. But, that's, the weird thing is, I mean, you said like I knew Crumb since I was like 14 or something. Um, so that whole era kind of made me. I
Right.
never read any other comics except underground comics. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents had them, and that's my introduction to comics was Zap. Um, so it's kind of like to take that out of me, to look at it from a different perspective, even, it's really hard because it forces me to reevaluate something that's so central to my being, um, which is something that I've always accepted.
Well, I wanted to ask when we were talking about the experiences you had at that school, I just have one question which I can get to now. Someone you've had this experience with Crumb, as you say, and I feel that in these conversations around Crumb that led to that moment that affected you, I feel like one of the things that gets misunderstood about Crumb when people defend him. They say,
Mhm.
oh, he's just an observer. He's just drawing society as it is. He's standing separate from it. He's just depicting how sick things are. But what I think is interesting about Crumb, and it relates into some ways in the nuanced nature in which you portray things, is I think Crumb is, and I see this as a positive. He's an observer, but he's also a participant. I mean, there's a cruelty in his work. That's what I see. And I think what makes people uncomfortable about it is that he doesn't resolve that for you. He doesn't tell you like, I'm not as cruel as these other things. He's in it. And even when he's not in it, the way he's depicting things, he's taking some glee, I think, in some of the pain that he's showing, right? And I think that makes people he doesn't I think that makes people very uncomfortable, but it's what makes him, I think, a specifically important artist. But that's my takeaway from his work. You're far more immersed in it than I am and have been for quite some time. So I'm wondering what your reaction to that might be. And if the students that were disgusted by him could come to that, if you could see a possibility of them approaching it that way, if you had been able to have the conversation in class about his work.
Well, I haven't been able to have that conversation, but I think what you're talking about is the complexity and the contradiction that exists in all of us. And yeah, I think you're right. There is cruelty and glee in his work. Where does that come from? You know, where does he come from? Um, and if the students could recognize the contradictory nature of their own personalities and the confusion of their own experience, then maybe they would be more open to recognizing it in another artist and realizing that there may be some value there. Um,
Especially as they are kind of they're doing something they were doing something to you, I mean,
yeah,
talking about
they were doing, yeah.
recognizing it in themselves, they were taking some glee in what they were doing.
Oh, they were for sure. Yeah. I mean, I saw their chats, which they didn't know that I saw, but yeah, they were pretty gleeful at times.
Joe Waite would like to ask, how do you avoid being self-conscious when making the work?
Um, you don't show it to anybody.
How do
For
you
years,
avoid
I did.
how do you avoid self-consciousness if you're publishing and making it public?
Then you say it's not autobiographical.
Okay.
I don't know. That sounds no, the truth is it's really, really difficult to avoid self-consciousness because I think we all naturally want to please other people or an imaginary audience. We don't even know who they are, but we want to please them. Um, but as soon as you do that, you're going to make assumptions about them and assumptions about society and what society wants to know or how they want to understand something. Um, and all of those things are almost impossible to get out of your mind, right? So I guess the challenge is constantly to know yourself and to trust yourself. And there will be times when you absolutely do not know yourself and you do not trust yourself and you do not trust your perceptions. It happens to all of us. But you have to kind of regather and know what your truth is. Because when you are in a moment when you can genuinely be yourself, that is the moment when you can reflect the world in a genuine way. And it's almost magical. It's like I can't tell anyone how to do it. I can't even tell myself how to do it. But that's the point that I always try to return to. And part of it is saying, it's kind of oppositional, saying, fuck the world, I'll do what I want, right? You have to have a lot of that.
There's some comments here that I want to read, but before I read them, I want to get there's a question that someone asked. I want to focus more right now on the direct questions. Generoso says, Phoebe, I so appreciate your work on the Juarez project, and I honestly don't understand the infantilization critique. I so hope the critique doesn't dissuade you from continuing to work on it further. That said, I'm curious if you're familiar with the doll animation work of Cristobal Leon and Joaquin Consigna, as they depict dire subject matter in a similar fashion. They're mostly known for a film called The Wolf House.
No, what? Cristobal Bell Leon and who?
Cristobal Leon and Joaquin Consigna, Cocin with the wavy line over
Beignet?
A. Yeah.
No, I'm not, but now I will be. See, I must live in a little frightened bubble. But thank you. What your name was? I can't see the
Uh,
chat.
Cartoonist Generoso Fiero. Fiero.
Thank you, Generosa. I really look forward to seeing that work. Um, does she like the work? Is it good?
Do you like the work, Generoso? I think yes. I would imagine they do. Yes, I love the film very much, they say.
Okay. Okay, good. Can't
I'm
wait
going to
to
read
see.
these comments that were made, and maybe you have a reaction to them, or let's see if this is a okay. Um, Uh, this is from Travis Head. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for taking some time with the question of autobiographical aspects. Great insights. I felt some similar hesitancy to categorize stories based in personal memory slash experience as autobio, not because I want to put distance between myself and my story, but rather out of recognition for the fallibility of memory and the liberties that I take, consciously and unconsciously, changing stuff in service of building a better story. I think I mean, is that a bit of what you go through?
Yeah, but I think you have to embrace that because, like I said, your memory is malleable. It you change it. I mean, you remember things with a different emotional charge and you remember certain facts differently over time because all of your memories go to forming your own concept of yourself and you'll change things when you've changed. So you can kind of embrace that. I mean, I think that's why I've told kind of the same story at times again
Yeah.
because it changes. And first of all, that's kind of funny to me, like amusing, and I want to like understand that. Um, so you say you're hesitant to tell these personal stories because of your recognition that memory is fallible. Um, I think any writer, any artist is at heart writing or making images about themselves in some way when unless they're doing some work for hire, right? You'll always return to something that's important to you. And it's a reflection of who you are or what you're trying to understand. And of course, you'll change it. You couldn't not change it because you can't remember everything. You can't remember what color shoes that person was wearing. You can't. You have to just fill it in. I mean, memory is fragmentary. You have to fill in lots of things.
Julian says, it's too bad that we have to deal with a higher level of ignorance. People that are too easily offended, or they're getting offended for other people. Students getting too emotional over critiques. I actually just maybe we could start ending on this. What that brought up to me is, and there's another message here. Maybe there's another question I'll get to after this. But what that brings up to me is that there's this line in your interview where you say that you're interested in anarchy, but you actually crave order. And when I read, especially the work in a child's life, you're depicting this era that the behavior in it happens now, but the frankness of people's reactions to things and there's this permissive uh quality to what's going on that approaches anarchy, right? And I think what's interesting about the student reaction to your work is that it's almost a reaction against the possibility of that ever happening, that kind of permissiveness, trying to control things to a degree so that kind of chaos can't happen, right? I mean, and so I wonder what to me, the reaction to your work that happened is so ridiculous and represents the worst qualities of these kinds of conversations. But as we said, I think before we started, there's parts of it that we agree with. And I'm wondering, with your in, interest in anarchy, but also desire for order, um, what you might think of that. If there's some common ground you can find when it doesn't get to the level that you experienced.
Um, Ask that question again. What is
It's
just
a bit
simplify it.
convoluted. I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
that what's the you're depicting these events that are very charged, whether they happened to you in this way or not. And there's a level of anarchy, there's a level of permissiveness that I think the people that are challenging you in your class would oppose and would oppose the things that happen to the character in the book happening. And there's a common ground desire for some kind of order that in some way I'm sure you share with the critique that you went through. I'm just wondering where the common ground, like we can write off the reaction to your work and say, yeah, these kids, they're so stupid, like they're too sensitive. But of course, there's some things, there's aspects of it that we shouldn't write off, but it
Well,
becomes caricatures itself. I'm just wondering if
yeah,
what you
I
think
mean, I
about.
guess the question is, as you describe it, okay, so not wanting those things to have happened is different from not wanting to talk about them.
Yes, that's very.
So, um, I, I'm 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 not thinking of a great answer for this. No, if you can't acknowledge that something happened, it's going to happen again, and you're not going to know about it till it's too late.
Right,
I
right.
mean, that's one thing. And if you can't reflect on something bad that happened and then acknowledge the complexity of it, then you're blocking things out and it's going to happen again. I mean, if we deny that there ever was a Holocaust, well, guess what? It's going to happen again. If we the things we refuse to see are actually like little time bombs. I don't know. I think that's not an answer to your question.
No, no, it is. I think that makes perfect sense to me. I'm gonna read something Neil Martinson just wrote here. Neil Martinson writes, I thank you for your beautiful work and willingness to share here. When I first saw your comics, I thought, wow, this is reality. I didn't care if it actually happened because you're not a journalist, you're an artist. And I think it's important to remember that the artist has a sole responsibility to be true to their vision and values, and to conflate an artist's work with their reality outside the page is a mistake. And I'm surprised that someone as sharp as Groth would grill you on this, but I haven't read the interview. I will probably get in trouble for this, but I think the students who gave you such hell sound insane, and the people telling that the people telling you that you are infantilizing the Mexican body are probably also insane. Many people have lost their minds in recent years, and I want to encourage you to stand strong and be confident in your stunning and powerful work.
Thank you so much, Neil. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Do you notice a market if that statement is saying people have lost their mind. I mean, do you notice a shift in cultural attitudes in general? Maybe it's well, I'd be interested in your
Yeah,
perspective.
well, I don't know if people have lost their mind, but I think, when people respond like they do, there's something they're afraid about. They're afraid of something. And so they need an outlet for that fear. And unfortunately, often it becomes a person, who and that's what happened. So like you said, we were talking about our classes earlier, and you said you felt a little bit of the same anxiety about talking about certain things or showing certain work, but not really. You know, and it's gotten better. You felt more relaxed, and I feel more relaxed as well. And part of it is I'm really concerned that if I can't get to the point where I can feel natural and talk about things that I think is great work or important work or interesting, complicated work, if I can't talk about those things, how can I give my students permission to do that interesting work?
Right.
How can I, I don't want them to feel like they're going to be censored by their fellow students or by society. In my class, I want them to do what they feel they need to do and, you know, develop their talents and their sensibilities to the furthest extent, um, and they can't if there's an atmosphere of fear. It doesn't just affect the professor, although the professor might be the target of that, it affects the whole class. And
Yeah.
that is painful. And it makes me wonder, what kind of education is this? Because fear is so destructive and it's something that can stick with you for a while. It doesn't drop immediately, certain types of fear. But anyway, my job is to get over it. So,
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. And I really, really thank you for sharing your thoughts on these things and sharing your current work. And yeah, just for making the time to do this. It's really, really appreciated.
thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
When I'm gonna get that link to that movie trailer because I
Oh
know
yeah, yeah. I can
if I don't copy it, I won't get the.
here, I'll can you do you see it in the chat?
Yeah, I'm just copying it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I can send you the chat too if you want a record of it.
Okay.
Well, thank you again. Thank you so much, Phoebe. And next week, Lily Correa will be hosting the symposium, and she will have the animator Yara El Fuli for the 403rd meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. Thank you again so much, Phoebe, and thank you to everyone who asked questions. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks, Phoebe.
everyone.
Thanks,
I was
Austin.
trying to say, I was trying to say thank you, everybody. Okay, I did. Okay.
Bye, bye, everyone.
Bye. Good
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Floyd. Hi, Floyd.
How's it
Bye,
going, you
Floyd.
guys?
I'm glad you came. Thanks.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, I'm leaving.
I can, yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
you know,
Floyd.
I have a question for both of you guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Half of the people have left, but this will be in the, yes.
How are your pages going?
Oh, I just talked to Austin about them.
Right. Phoebe is supposed to do a story for an upcoming issue of Jaywalk magazine, which Floyd and I edit together. Um, but
Well,
you know,
yeah, and after talking to Austin tonight, I have a newfound energy for drawing.
Yay.
there you
Yeah,
go.
is
What about you, Austin?
is that Caitlin? It's Caitlin. Hi. I can't
Well,
hear you. Did she say something?
Caitlin, do you want to talk to here?
Uh,
I'm just going to open
I
this up to
will.
anyone.
I will have to get a copy of that issue of Jaywalk.
Hey,
Oh, good.
this is this, the symposium's not about me and the publications I'll have for sale. So, but it's yes,
Well, you've
it will.
already ended the meeting, so you can talk about that.
Yeah, but I'm gonna upload the whole thing to YouTube. If people stay on the YouTube recording to the end, they get to hear this bonus, promotional promotion. But it's very exciting that you'll be doing this comic. And what I said to Phoebe before the meeting started, Floyd, was that she was asking when the deadline was, and what I say is with Domino Publications, there's never the deadline is when the stories are done because we're not doing anything for a I mean I don't want to get Phoebe off of the trajectory of working. But the magazine will come out when everybody's completed their pages. And I'm working on
Yeah.
pages too, Floyd.
Yeah, how are your pages going?
I have to finish something else up first, and it's right next time. I have 3 of 7 done, but I have
Wow.
to. But yeah, we're getting there.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's exciting.
Yeah. How are your pages going, Floyd?
Oh, they're going great. Well, I've got all of this stuff good over here that I'm working on, just like geez, I wish I could switch my camera. Can I switch it? Flip it? No. Oh yeah. Like I've got all this laid out. I've got like 40 more pages that I'm working on here. But I've just been working on it while listening to your talk because all of your like the same philosophies that you're talking about are like just exactly what I need in my brain when it comes to like fiction and nonfiction and autobiography because there's really like when you make work in general like all of the lines begin to blur, so why like have any sort of terms to delineate it, it's
Yeah.
such an abstract. But
Well, I didn't want to give, I didn't want to be continue like bring us back to 2004 and give you a hard time about that again, Phoebe. I just was interested in the commentary on, I was just interested in hearing your thoughts on it.
Right. Do you know, okay, do you have the actual comics journal?
I
That,
don't I
I do.
too I have a printout of
oh,
the transcript.
okay. Because I just want to say the cover of that thing, they asked me to do the cover, but it's a photograph of me and no one recognizes the other person is Gary Groth.
Oh no, I knew. Well, yeah. I
Oh, you
mean,
did? Okay.
yeah.
But everyone
It's
says, who
very
is
funny.
that?
Because did you put him in here? I mean, for people watching, let me find it.
No, I put him in, but it was kind of a joke because he was making, he was just so persistent. So I said, well, he should be on the cover.
Well, it like has him as like a cowboy or something, or like a detective. Like you have
Yeah.
you're drawing him as a detective, it seems like. Okay, here. It's very funny. Give me a second.
But it's a photograph. Yeah, I don't know. But
See?
yeah, we're looking really like
It's a cool cover.
Very interview magazine.
right. And see, I wrote Phoebe Gloeckner gets to talk to Gary Groth. That's what it felt like. Like, okay, Gary.
But did you now I want to know, is this like an added joke that you're like, did you collage like a detective gumshoe hat on him because he's like trying to get
No, that he was asking me to send all these pictures so he could maybe use them for the article. And I told him, well, you have to send me some pictures of yourself. And then he did, and so I just used that one.
Oh, so he had this. So that's him actually. For years I've been like that's like an added joke. Like you're making him into like some kind of genre movie star or something.
Well, I was, and I was doing that for myself too,
Hmm.
but not just with the hat. It's
Right, yeah.
stupid, but I got to title the thing that I like, I get to talk to Gary Groth because he I mean, he wouldn't even review my books. It took years for them to even review my books. I
Hmm.
kept asking him to, but so I felt like, oh, finally, I get to talk to Gary Groth.
It's an interesting conversation. I mean, it's animated by this. It's a respectful argument for about 40 pages. And I think it's one that I think it's more interesting than an argument. It's like you guys are talking about stuff that I find very interesting, and I think the conflict that goes on illuminates that. I
Right.
also imagine it was frustrating.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun and frustrating and fun. Yeah.
yeah, I like the thing on the back of it, the cover of the photo comic on the back cover.
Yeah, that's actually the star of that one is actually someone from Juarez.
Whoa.
Oh, I don't have. Do you have that in front of you, Floyd?
No, I wish it's at another space actually. I don't have I own a copy, but I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately.
Yeah, back covers are elusive.
Yeah.
But anyway, you must be exhausted and
Well,
ready.
this was a nice bonus round.
Yeah.
But thank you again so much, Phoebe. And yeah.
Thank you, Austin. And again, you were the very first person who ever asked me to talk at anything.
Oh, well, I
And that
remember
was
that
so
talk, and it
long.
seemed like you were an amazing pro beyond. So seemed like
Right.
you've been giving talks for forever.
Sure. Okay.
Oh,
Any
definitely. Okay.
Good night, you guys. Thanks for the great talk.
Good
Bye,
night,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.